Hello and welcome to the Game Line, Wales Online's rugby show, going out live on Facebook and YouTube and a little later on in podcast form. I'm your host, Ben James, and I'm joined by Simon Thomas. It's one of those big days in rugby, and it's the Wales v England team announcement days. We've had both teams. Simon, you've been sitting in on Eddie Jones and Wayne Pivac press conferences. It's always an exciting day, isn't it?
Yes, I spent the morning with Edward Jones. Always an interesting experience. It was a kind of mix from him in terms of the tack he was taking. On the one hand, he was stressing how he thinks that Wales will relish being written off in this game, and talked about how they'll be motivated by playing in Llanelli and kind of heart and soul land of Welsh rugby. But then on the other hand, he sent out the warning that Wales are going to face a level of intensity they've never encountered before. So it depends which part of it you want to listen to from Eddie. Yeah, he seemed quite upbeat, quite confident, and I guess they would be because England are playing well and Wales are going through a tough time.
Absolutely. Let's get straight into the Wales team then, because I suppose that's the first thing to talk about. Largely as we expected. I mean, we did the story last night that Lloyd Williams and Dan Bigg were going to be the halfbacks. Lloyd's first start since Japan 2016. One change that we didn't quite get right, Liam Williams, not in the 23, still not over that facial injury, so Lee Halfpenny at fullback. But what's your make of the starting 15?
Well, Liam first, I think, appropriately enough for someone who was going to be playing 15. He had 15 stitches, I think, in his mouth after catching a boot against Georgia. So, I mean, they said at the time, didn't they, that he was going to be fine, but, it's a nasty old injury, that, and clearly, having looked at it, they've decided that it wouldn't be appropriate for him to play, so he misses out. Hugely experienced, reliable figure coming in, staying in the side in a sense, in Lee Halfpenny. He'll let absolutely no one down. He'll bring that positional play and he'll bring that solidity. And, there's an argument as well as perhaps when he does counter, he perhaps links a bit more than Liam Williams does, as we talked about last week. So, fine player. Shame not to have Liam on board. But there is still firepower in that back three with Adams and Lewis Rees-Zammit, whoever we wanted to see play, and he's in for this game. I think the big talking point selections, well, one will be scrum-half. We've just been listening, and both of us to his Zoom press conference. And, a month ago, he wasn't in the squad. Very few people really talking about him as an option. He's come in, and now he's starting. First start for Wales in 4 years. It's a remarkable story, and I guess it's proof that you should never give up. And Lloyd, I know him quite well, and one thing he has never done is give up, and he is a consummate professional. And even over this summer with rugby being shut down in lockdown, he trained harder than ever before. He talked to John Melville about him, and says he's just been in absolute peak condition. Did that with the mind of being the ultimate professional that he is. And the end result is he's now playing for Wales. And in terms of form, he's been excellent for Cardiff Blues prior to coming into the squad. He's probably been the form player in the time he's had on the field for Wales. And what he does bring is that ability to get the ball away quickly from the ruck area, from the breakdown, which I think is integral to the way Wales want to play, especially against a side like England, where you don't want to get trapped into an arm wrestle around the fringes. So that speed of ball he'll bring will be important. And he also has, a very accomplished box kicker. So that's an interesting one. I think the other one that's got people talking is the selection of hooker. I think people probably thought that Ryan Elias would have slipped down the pecking order after having a bit of a torrid time with his line-out throwing in Dublin. But Wayne Pivac is clearly an admirer, knows him well from their time together at the Scarlets. And explaining the selection, he says they got for their strongest scrummaging front row, and the feeling is that Ryan Elias contributes on that front significantly. So he gets that nod. And then the other one really is the back row. And with that one, really, you're talking a situation where really heavily influenced by injuries there. Josh Navidi, Justin Tipuric, Ross Moriarty, all unavailable. So it's, again, a selection that just a couple of weeks ago you couldn't have believed was coming. James Botham at 7. And, a month ago, you certainly couldn't have seen Shane Lewis Hughes there either. I remember back in August watching Cardiff Blues beat the Ospreys and watching those two young flankers a fine game. And I remember thinking then, of these two, they could be the future for Wales. Well, just 3 months later, the future is now, isn't it? So you never know what's coming around the corner.
Indeed, and it's some ask, isn't it? If you look at the England team, they've gone for a 6-2 split on the bench, so they've got two flankers coming off the pine themselves. So for James Botham and Shane Lewis-Hughes, this is a real acid test, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think James will be more comfortable playing at 7 than he did at 6 last week. I mean, that is really his position, and he does dovetail very effectively with Shane. I mean, it goes back to almost the kind of legit Warburton 6-7 that we've seen in the past. Shane chops people down, gets them on the ground. His tackle count is phenomenal, and James is very effective over the ball and in the contact area generally. Well, he also brings a real, heavyweight tackling game. He's another serial tackler. I guess realistically, with Faletau there as well, I think he made 19 tackles against Ireland, something like that. You've got a back row there that is well equipped defensively, and you might argue that's something that's going to be required with the way England have been so dominant. If you look at the way they dominated possession, particularly in the first half against Ireland, Wales are going to be stretched defensively or put to the test defensively. And you do have a back row there that can really sort of contribute on that front. Huge ask, though, isn't it, for James in particular? I mean, realistically, if you're looking at the open side pecking order going into the autumn, you'd have said Tipperick, Navidi, Josh McLeod, James Davis, all ahead. Maybe Ollie Griffiths might well have come into the equation had it not been for the Dragons being in isolation, the COVID outbreak there. But he's leapt over a number of players, but opportunity knocks sometimes. I know we try and talk about James and just James and not the family, but I do tend to remember a young Ian Botham being called up in 1977, once again, proof how old I am, to play in the Ashes series. He was 21 maybe at the time and got his chance, took it, and the rest is history. And James is just listening to him now talking. He was emphasising the point that he wants to make his own legacy, and that's great to hear, isn't it? He's proud of his family heritage, but he wants to be seen as an individual himself. And I know, having spoken to him a few times, just how much his Welsh roots mean to him. He's born in Cardiff. It's always meant a lot. And it was telling to hear him say, this is the game he's always dreamt of playing in. And despite having grown up in England, he always dreamt of playing in it, wearing a red jersey.
Indeed. Let's stop and look at a couple of comments then before we go any further. Harley Worthy, put my reading glasses on. Surprised Rhys Webb is on the bench. Would have gone for Gareth Davis for impact. I suppose that's something to discuss, is pretty much not the decline, but just how far Gareth Davis has fallen in the pecking order. You think this time last year he was Wales' starting scrum half, undoubtedly, in the World Cup and in the Grand Slam. There's been a lot of flux in that position this year. This is now Wales' fourth starter in a calendar year, which is remarkable. Gareth Davis is a man whose sort of stock has fallen quite dramatically on test level, isn't it?
Well, it's symbolic of what's happened in that position, though, Ben. If you look at it since Wayne Pibroch's come in, it's been arguably the position that's seen the most chop and change. During the Six Nations, when he came in at the start of the year, you had Thomas Williams starting, Gareth Davis, Rhys Webb. You've had Kieran Hardy. Now you've got Lloyd Williams. To have 5 different people starting in the space of, 7 games, something like that, 7 or 8 games, that's a lot of chop and change. And I guess it does point to the fact that maybe Wayne Pibroch and Stevie Jones haven't quite been able to decide exactly who they want then. What they've gone for in Lloyd, I guess, is someone you know exactly what you get with Lloyd, because he is a very polished performer, and he plays a certain way for the Blues. What's interesting is that with Cardiff Blues over the last 3 or 4 years, he has become somebody who's implemented the box kick a lot, and you kind of saw at the Blues the contrast maybe between the live wire breaking, running, ball handling Thomas Williams, and Lloyd would be more the tactical, controlling 9 with the box kicking game. Now, I think what you saw when he's played for Wales this autumn is you forget sometimes just what a great service he's got. You know, it's a razor-sharp feed he gives to the backs, gets the ball away quickly. And you're seeing that side of him coming out again. The Gareth Davis one is interesting, isn't it? Because Pivac knows him really well from their time against the Scarlets and was important to them in the successes that they had. But it perhaps didn't quite work for him in the game in this autumn. And Gareth will come again. You know, he's a real force of nature player. Rhys Webb's a quality player as well. You know, somebody who, you know, can make a real impact coming onto the field. So I think it is all indicative of the fact that when you've got a lot of options in a position, sometimes it's quite hard to decide what to do, isn't it? And I still think we're in a process of flux. If you look at it, Lloyd, what date? What's the kickoff? What's the date of the game? It's the 29th this week or the 30th? Wales, England. It's on Saturday, isn't it? So 28th. I'm just thinking that Lloyd's birthday, he actually turns 31 on November the 30th. So he'll be looking for a little early birthday present there. Rhys Webb, I think, is 32 next month. Gareth Davis is at 30. You're looking ahead to the World Cup. Thomas Williams has just returned. What's going to happen over the next 3 years? It's a fascinating position. Kieran Hardy in the mix as well. Rodri Williams, the Dragons. Lots of options, but still trying to work out who number one is.
Indeed. Getting quite a few comments about Ryan Elias. I think a lot of people aren't massive fans of him, if I click on the right comment. So Jamie Phillips here says, how fortunate is Ryan Elias to get the number 2 jersey? Needs a big performance on Saturday to prove that he's a test standard hooker. One here from Christian Morgan. Elias just for his size, you know, big front row. Otherwise, D is much better for him. It's a funny one because I'll be honest, I've never been massively convinced by Elliot D on the test stage. I've always thought he's done well off the bench, but whenever he's been given a chance to start a match, he's never really grabbed the opportunities for me. And yet,
yeah, you're right.
In many ways, his stock is rising in the Welsh public's eye by not playing this autumn.
Well, Josh Navidi, I mean, Josh's stock was already high. Ross Moriarty's stock already high in many ways. And when the team struggles in absence, notice it. On that front, let's say one other name, Ken Owens. You know, he makes you realise just what a cog he's been in that side for a lot. You know, best part of a decade really in the squad, and then first choice really for the last 5 years, along with Alan Wynne-Jones. You know, the heartbeat, the totemic figure in that pack. We thought he would be a difficult man to replace when he picked up that shoulder injury a few last month, 6 weeks ago. And that's proved to be the case. Very difficult man to replace. And you perhaps don't realise just what Ken has brought until now he's not there. In terms of the reliability at set piece, the hard yard carrying, just the hitting of ruck, everything physically brings, and the solidity at set piece. It's been hard to find the man to take over. Parry's played in, I think, 3 of the games off the bench. They don't seem sorry to feel that he's ready to start yet. They don't see that as the option. Elliot D came in, was part of a strong scrummaging unit against Georgia, part of a winning team. And given the struggles that Brian Elias had with his line-out throwing in Dublin, the expectation was that he would start. But everything I'm hearing and people I talk to about how Wayne Pivac views certain players, I understand he's got a lot of time for Ryan Elias. Thinks a lot of him. Clearly, sees him as the best scrummaging option. I suppose it is valid to say that while Wales lost 3 lineouts on their own throw in Dublin, there were 3 lost on their own throw against Georgia when Elliot D was starting. So it wasn't as if the lineout problems were really completely resolved. I mean, it's a fair bet, I think, that he'll have been working very hard on that, Ryan, over the last 2 weeks. The other thing you got to look at is who are the lineout targets this weekend in terms of what he's got to throw at.
Yeah.
He's got Jake Ball, who's a solid option at the front, and he's got Alan Wynne. There's no Tipuric as a lineout option at the back. I think a key man in the lineout operation this weekend could be Shane Lewis-Hughes. He's got a great leap, very athletic, both on your own ball and an attacking opposition ball. I've seen him steal a few for Cardiff Blues. I think, will be a key man. Obviously, that'll be tail ball. Great ball if you can hit it. but with it brings a risk. But I expect to see Shane as a pivotal line-out target for Wales this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's obviously Ryan Elias has become something of a sort of not an easy target for Wales fans, because a lot of the criticism is relatively justified, but it's very simple to just blame lineouts going wrong on the hooker. You know, it's a lot more complex than just a poor throw. I think I haven't massively looked at Wales's lineout over the autumn, but the few things I have noticed is it just something doesn't seem right in how they're going about their business, in terms of they're almost, at times it looks like they're looking at how the defensive lineout is set and then almost throw in there. You know,
Yeah, I mean, there's two primary ways things tend to go wrong at a lineout. You either get picked off by an effective jump from the opposition, or you tend to overthrow. Now, if you're being targeted in certain positions, then you've got to adapt lineout call and look for other options. But if you're overthrowing, if you're missing your target, there's not much. You're not going to go very far. You know, dealing with an opposition jumping against you is one thing in a good contest, but when you're just overthrowing, that becomes an issue. And you know, that's sometimes nerves, I guess. Sometimes the timing of the lift. As you said, there's lots of component parts. Jonathan Humphreys is the forwards coach, taken over from Rob McBride. A hooker himself, you know, somebody who has worked with many hookers and many line-out units over the years. Osprey's line-out was effective when he was coach there. It's just something that you can have to resolve through practice and working at it and getting the timing spot on. It'll be intriguing to see just how much, especially early on, England look to apply pressure there, who they will look to get up in the air. Launchbury is an effective figure at the front, isn't he? You know, Wales really need the first couple of lineouts to go smoothly, just to give everything, and in particular to give Ryan Elias some confidence, because he does offer a lot around the field as a carrier, and he's a physical guy, and you hope it goes well for him. But yeah, you do worry a little bit about the lineout, because not because of Ryan's situation, but because it hasn't functioned generally that well this autumn.
Yeah, I think you saw what happened to Ireland, and they tried to play their way out of pressure and be a bit sort of inventive with the line out. That's exactly what Wales are trying to do at the minute. They're trying to evolve the line out into basically an attacking weapon in itself, in terms of a platform, and that takes time, and that takes things to go right. And when it doesn't go right, it's probably more noticeably wrong. But we'll leave the line out. I think
just one thing on your point you made there, of course, the Johnny May wonder try came from a steal off another ball, you know. So that's the risk if you lose line-out ball to England on your own throw.
You would hope, though, because that came from Ireland turning down kicking penalties, which they did a lot on Saturday.
I think Wales will.
You'd hope with Lee Harvey in the team, Wales won't be doing that. I don't think Wales are going to take that risk.
Wales will be kicking from Swansea.
Well, funny, that brings us on to the next comment, which is from Daniel Cook. How can Wales fans overcome their extreme pessimism? It's a spiral of despair, it seems. He's a lot more optimistic.
Well, I will tell him.
Old as time, isn't it?
I will tell him. I wrote, those who are subscribed to the Wales Online newsletter will get my weekly column, and they will have read in there this week me going through a series of occasions in the past, over the last 30 plus years, when Wales were written off. It was something that was certainly habitually the case in the late 80s, and the number of times I rolled up to Cardiff in 85, 87, 89, England overwhelming favourites, overwhelming in all those games. And Wales won the lot, you know, so it's not impossible. Eddie Jones touched on it today when he said that Wales will relish being written off. And I think there will be an element of, certainly you can imagine the team talk from Alan Wynne-Jones, you know, in terms of what he will expect from his players and how he will use the kind of the way in which Wales are really being given no hope as motivation. Probably a little bit more difficult when you're then walking out to an empty stadium. You know, if you rattle the drums and then walk out to 75,000 people going mad, it maintains the momentum, doesn't it? But Alan Wynne, you know, Alan Wynne will do everything he can to rally his troops, and he's a proud man. And there's a lot of, you know, young players in this England team who, you know, they're inexperienced, but there's a massive opportunity for them. Massive. You look at the likes of Reece Sammer, Johnny Williams, Tompkins is relatively new to it. Lloyd Williams, unplayed for 4 years, started again for, it's massive for them. Samson Lee's got the chance now, ahead of Thomas Francis. Jake Ball, he's going to come in hurting people. There's a lot of players there, will be, absolutely determined to show that and make the most of this opportunity. But saying all that, England will be rightly favourite. I think the pessimism thing is because people are fearful of an absolute drubbing. Let's be honest about it. I've seen people on social media today saying, 40, 50 points. That would be back to the mid 90s and even the early noughties times. And I remember twice in a row Wales went to Twickenham and lost, I think, by a margin of 36 points. We do not want to go back to those days. And as Eddie Jones rightly said, a lot of the players involved this weekend, although there are new faces, a lot of the players involved were involved in the Grand Slam, were involved in a team that was 3 points away from a World Cup final. So in a sense, that's putting a bit of pressure on the coach, isn't it? By pointing that out.
Eddie Jones, though, that is.
But that is true. I think what you really want to see is a committed performance from Wales, which I think you will see defensively in particular. It would be lovely just to see a glimpse of, the attacking game that Wayne Pivac and Stephen Jones want to put on. And I think maybe one little thought, that way that Ireland scored that try late on through Jacob Stockdale last weekend. Very simple chip over the top against the on-rushing defence. And I can expect that Wayne Biggar, that'd be interesting. Dan Biggar will be, looking to exploit that aerially. But it's going to be hard, Ben, isn't it? It's going to be hard because we're playing against a very good side.
Yeah.
And we've had a tough run. But I suppose history does show you that you should never really completely give up when it comes to this fixture.
It brings us quite nicely again on to the next question, which is from Tom Parry. It's quite a lengthy question. What do you think our overall game plan will be to outsmart a very aggressive English defence? They'll probably play very conservative rugby built on solid defensive turnover like they did against Ireland. Will we try and kick tactically through Biggar and Williams, box kicks, or will we try and run it and get it into the hands of Lewis Rees-Zammit and Adams and come up with some magic to break them down? Now, funny enough, I've been sort of going over the England defence. I'm hoping to find the time today to write a piece on that tomorrow, and it's going to be interesting to see what we do, because if you look at Ireland last weekend, they came out with the intention to kick behind them and to exploit the space because England blitzed very hard. Around halfway through this, I think after Johnny May's try, when they went 12-0 down, they just abandoned it and started chasing the game. And it's only late on that they sort of reverted to it. So I think that the kicking game is going to be the best way, because England are just so quick out of the blocks in midfield in terms of the blitz. I think you've got to play off. We played off 10 a lot under Pivac. I think you've probably got to go back to the Gatland sort of model of playing off 9, just because then England can't get out as quickly. I think we're going to have to kick a lot just to keep them honest. I think even, obviously, a lot of it comes down to getting a platform to begin with. I think even if you look at kick chases, Liam Williams isn't playing, so we're probably not going to run as much ball out of kick chases, but England get more kick chases, turnovers from kick chases than anywhere else. And it's against teams who don't drop number 8s into the backfield, which Wales and Ireland don't do. It might be worth considering Faletau dropping back for kicks, just so if Halfpenny or someone does run, decide to run it back, there's breakdown support.
Yeah, I think Biggar is an accomplished tactical kicker. Lloyd Williams is as well. So I think they will utilize those skills. Whether it'll be an aerial contest they create or a kick chase into corners they create, that'll be interesting to see. Whether it be the wipers to the side or whether it'll be done the channels from Lloyd. England are good into the high ball, and it will be a challenge for Wales. The one thing that struck me particularly about the Ireland-England game is, along with Exeter, I think Ireland over the last 3 or 4 years have probably become the most efficient team in the world at exploiting the red zone when they're 10 metres out through successive ball carries. The pick and go has brought them huge success in very Exeter style. Just didn't work on against England. Such was the resolution of England's defence on the line. There was a period in that second half where Ireland just pummeled away, pick and go after pick and go after pick and go. And it almost always with them results in a try for Stander or That's Rory Best back in the day, or Furlong. Just didn't happen. And if they can't do that against England, well, I don't think there's much point Wales trying, if they get in those positions, to just pummel away. I think you have to look for something a little bit different. I think that it was interesting for me, the try that was scored, the first try against Georgia. I don't particularly like Nick Tompkins being turned into a ball carrier. But the one thing he did do in that moment for that try for Lewis Summit was he kept the ball alive, managed to free his hands in contact. And I think against an all-encompassing England defence that is so physical in the close quarters, I think getting the ball away from point of contact, be it through an offload, be it through the speed of service of ruck, be it even a kick to put pressure on. I think if we end up going into those big, unwelcoming English arms around the fringes or through pick and go, we're just going to get eaten up and turned over. I did an interview with Scott Quinnell this week, and I asked him what was it like playing against England, and he said he spent a lot of the time just wishing a game of rugby would start, because they basically looked to strangle Wales into submission through the 90s and early noughties. Squeeze the life out of you, he said. And the danger that if you get embroiled in that kind of arm wrestle, this current England team will squeeze the life out of you in the same way. So it comes back to getting the ball away from the point of contact and then stressing the English defence in other ways. Easier said than done, probably.
Yeah.
But I think that will be the tactic.
Yeah, because obviously James Haskell last week was talking about just England's sort of mentality under Eddie Jones is any player who's not interested in defence isn't going to play for England. Every single one of them wants to smoke opposition players. So I think if Wales go into this match and play a few phases off 10 and then look to say do a pullback pass out to 12 to sort of get it wide, they're going to get absolutely hammered. I think they've got to really be quite adventurous with how they look to stretch the England defence because they push up so hard in midfield. I think you've either got to go coast to coast, and once you go coast to coast, then the forwards in the England defence will probably get a bit sort of splintered and a bit out of place. And that's when I think Ireland made a break on, I think Gibson Park made a break where he sort of just looked around the fringes and it was Joseph, Slade and a few other backs. And that's where maybe you can catch England off guard. But of course, all that's easier said than done when you're not really providing much of a platform by winning the collisions.
The other one that interests me is Talupe Faletau. You just saw little glimpses against Ireland of him coming back to somewhere near the old Talupe, because he's had a very tough time with injuries. It takes time to come back from that. But you just saw a little bit of it, particularly in the second half in Dublin. Now, when I think back of when he was at his most effective for Wales and for the Lions, it was when he was like the second carrier, where you'd have a lot of the time Jamie Roberts would make the initial bust, and then Faletau would be the person taking the ball off second or even third phase and making those arcing runs, those wider runs, where he'd be actually running against outside backs and using not just his strength, but also his good footwork in those situations. Now, in that sense, you wonder whether Johnny Williams could have a very important role to play for Wales this weekend. He was given a job last week because he was away in Llanelli, and it was a day for direct hard running and getting over the gain line. And he showed his ability to do that. I thought he was one of the main pluses last week, and I think he will have an important role. He's not a Jamie Roberts, he's not an enormous carrier, but he's an effective carrier.
Yeah.
And it's not just the carry bish bosh bash with him. He's got nice hands as well. So there was a couple
he's
of
closer
occasions
to a Hadley Parks, isn't he?
Yeah. You look at it, there were a couple of occasions where he went hard, and then the third time, little short, delicate, deft, sympathy pass off the shoulder to Tompkins. Williams will have a key role to play because he is the main carrier in that back line. I think if you can then get Talupe Faletau making those arcing runs, that's a threat to any side in World Rugby, because when you've got someone with that athleticism and power, because there's a lot of talk about whether he should play or whether Wainwright should play. Wainwright had an excellent game against Georgia, but I mean, in fairness, prior to that performance, we've been saying that Aaron had slipped back over the year. So you have to put it in the context of what Georgia, but it does tie in with what I've said for a while now. I think his position, I think Pivac is right. I think 8 is Wainwright's position. because he does have that athleticism and pace and dynamism. And the more you want to get the ball in his hands, the better. And that's going to happen at 8. So close call there. I just think that Faletau's experience and perhaps his ability to deal with being on the retreat at times in the scrum, which may happen, and having to take the ball out and make ground will count for him. But there are a few things I'd like to see this weekend. You'd love to see Toby really roll back the years and show that he is still a class player.
Absolutely. Indeed. It'd be interesting to see how often Wales do offload. We mentioned offloads a lot there. I think just the number of offloads have just dropped virtually week on week throughout the Pivac reign, which is a disappointment because that's really how you stop teams getting line speed in defence if there's no ruck. So hopefully we'll see some more this week, but it's probably not the weekend to do it.
No, but I remember very briefly, I watched just the other day the Scarlets try Ty Burns scored against Bath in the Champions Cup during the best season we've seen from a regional team for quite a while. And that was all about getting the ball away from the point of contact. Quite often, prior to an offload, it was like speed of pass and speed of support play. It was all about the handling and keeping it alive. A couple of offloads in there, but speed of service, speed of passing. And I think Pivac clearly wants people who are comfortable with the ball in hand, get it away from the contact, get it away from the big lumbering opposition. That's the template, isn't it? Let's see if it can happen.
Absolutely. I suppose the final thing to finish on then on this show is predictions.
Well, that's the trouble. I'm getting quite positive.
Talk about
now I'm going to have to give a prediction.
We had a question about pessimism earlier, so
you go first. You go first.
It's just hard to look beyond an England win, isn't it? Probably something like, I don't think it's going to be record breaking, is it? I think 32, 18, 15, 32, 15.
Well, I got the margin of victory exactly right last week. Over readers noticed 18 points. I think this week, then, Roy, I think England will win by 22 points. And here's the question for you. Would the Welsh public settle for that?
No, it's probably the honest answer. I don't think.
What's the tipping point margin for you?
Well, this is the thing, is it? I mean, we've been in a Pivac press conference this afternoon, and Pivac, Wayne himself isn't going to let this game define his reign in his mind.
But other people might.
And there was a few journalist questions saying, well, is it okay to lose to England this weekend? Which it's obviously not. But it'd be interesting to see, if and when defeat does happen, how the Welsh public reacts, because it's not going to be good, is it?
I know, and then if you lose heavily, and then your next game is Italy, who've played some decent stuff of late. It's tough. But let's try and end on a positive note and say that there are a lot of young, talented players in this team who have shown that they can offer things that that provide reason to be excited about. Let's see Lewis Rees-Zammit running the ball. He's done it against English opposition in the Premiership. Let's see Johnny Williams making yardage. Let's see the old Faletau. Let's see Jake Ball hurting people. Let's see the scrum going as well as it did last week. Let's not give up hope completely, he says.
There you go. That's one to hope for this weekend. And as always, you can catch all the latest action from Wales v England on Wales Online.